Welcome from the deep. I am Mike the Finder.
And I am Book of Brett.
And today we are talking about 2022's The Menu. I didn't know too much about this going into it. I think I had seen the trailer for this movie whenever I went and saw Violent Night in theaters. And I thought, oh, that looks pretty interesting, but I did not remember anything about it. Did you know anything going into this?
No, I didn't know anything going into it until we were just looking for a movie to do. Brittany knew about it, which I found out after I watched it without her. And so I didn't know anything about it, though.
Was she pissed?
Not happy. She's not happy. I promised to go roller skating with her to make up for it. So
I ran this by Nicole before I watched it without her because I knew that she had wanted to see it a lot as well.
Yeah.
I think maybe not knowing anything about this kind of made it better going into it.
Yes. Now, okay. I will say this. I was looking up stuff online about it, mostly like where to find it and everything. And all I saw was something about people getting together and a menu. And so going into this, for a great deal of time, I thought we were going to see people get eaten. Like I thought this was going to be like a cannibal horror movie.
Yeah.
And it's way not that.
Yeah.
But so I not only went into this knowing nothing or little to nothing, but what I did know was not anywhere close to what this movie actually is.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny, dude. As they have little hints at the beginning of this that what's her face is noticing.
Anna Taylor-Joy.
Taylor-Joy.
Yeah.
Anya. I think it's Anya. Anya Taylor-Joy.
Anya.
There are little hints at what's to come. Like when the boat pulls away and when they close the door on her. There's little tiny hints here and there. And that was the moment I knew, and I have it written down here, I watched too many horror movies.
Yeah, because I don't feel like it's even that. I feel like those are elements, tropes, whatever you want to call them, that are in a lot of horror movies.
Yes,
but they're in a lot of horror movies because they work. Because from the very get-go, they let you know something is way off here.
Well, but they're very subtle. I will say that.
Yeah.
Like it's really subtle, and if you don't watch as much horror maybe as we do, they're not something that you might notice. But not knowing really anything about this going into it, noticing those small little things here and there, I really expected this to go off the rails at some point, even though I didn't know anything about it. The cannibal thing had not occurred to me, although that is pretty interesting. And maybe more interesting than what actually happens.
Maybe it's a Freudian slip.
But as we usually do, why don't you go ahead and give us a synopsis here? We'll jump over to IMDb. We'll start with our overall thoughts. We'll go into specifics. Then we'll talk about the ending. Then we will give our ratings, all of which will be down in the timeline under the chapters here. I also, before we get into this, actually, before you do that, I also want to mention we do upload the audio for these podcasts on Spotify and other podcast apps. This is something we haven't been super stringent upon in the last year, but we do have an RSS feed. It's just From the Deep, and you can find us on Spotify, all of that stuff. And if you are just listening to us on one of your podcast apps, make sure to go check out the video version of this on the YouTube channel, From the Deep. That is something we have not mentioned, I feel like, in probably over a year. And it's something that we really need to get better about. Okay, now go ahead and give us the synopsis for The Menu.
So I'm going to do this, and the rest of the episode I'm going to try to be as clean as possible because terms of service agreements. But the movie is basically about a group of elitists who are going out to an island to enjoy what they think is going to be an amazing meal made by the world's best chef, and then quickly find out that they are there for very different reasons.
Yeah, it's a pretty good synopsis. And then as we usually do, we'll jump over to IMDb at the podcast drive-in over here. The Menu from 2022, rated R, 1 hour and 47 minutes. It has a 7.4 out of 10 on IMDb. It's comedy, horror, thriller. I think comedy is being a little generous there.
There's jokes.
Yeah.
there's
I
like
guess that
2
makes
or
it a comedy.
3. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
It's directed by Mark Malloy. It was written by Seth Reese and Will Tracy. It stars Ray Fiennes, Anya Taylor-Joy, and Nicholas Hoult. And then,
as well as, I do want to say, as well as several other big name
John
actors and
Leguizamo,
actresses. Paul Aberstein, I think is his name. He was in Prison Break. Adelstein. Judith Light. I mean, there's a very good cast in this movie.
Yes, there is. And then the synopsis from IMDb: a young couple travels to a remote island to eat at an exclusive restaurant where the chef has prepared a lavish menu with some shocking surprises.
Which is the closest I've ever gotten to IMDb's synopsis.
That's true, actually. That was actually surprisingly close.
Usually I say one thing and then Mike, like IMDb through Mike goes, nah, dude.
Well,
no, this is actually what it was.
That's one of the reasons I like to read the IMDb synopsis, even though that you give us one every time, is because I think it's fun to see how you describe it versus what IMDb says with one sentence.
I just feel like IMDb is just constantly going stupid. No, this is what it's about.
Okay, well, why don't you give me your overall thoughts on this movie?
I liked this a lot. This movie has a lot to say. It is artistic from visual to conceptual. It is written artistically. It almost plays out like a menu throughout the whole thing. And I don't know if that's because we do get these little place cards that say amuse-bouche, first course, second course, all that stuff, which, by the way, the last like 2 or 3 meal descriptions are hysterical.
Yeah, they are.
They're really, really funny. But overall, dude, I really, really liked this movie. I went into it trying to keep an open mind. Anya Taylor-Joy's been in a lot of movies that I really liked, and she's great in horror. I would say she is one of the scream queens that we have right now, simply because she's not only in horror, but she does a great job in horror. Ralph Fiennes is always amazing. Between Schindler's List and Harry Potter, do you really need to say anything else about Ralph? Right? I mean, there's a lot more. Don't get me wrong; he's got a huge filmography, but I mean, the dude's just amazing. John Leguizamo is funny in this. Tom Holt is great in this. It's just, the whole thing is written very well. The character development is really good. And one thing I really, really appreciated about this is they did something that I really like in a lot of movies in general, where there's pre-existing drama with the characters on screen. And it's, when done right, it's a thing that adds to the character development. And it's like these little like nuggets of things we get to find out along the way as the big picture plays out. I really, really appreciated that.
Well, we have very, very different thoughts on this movie. I struggled to get through this.
Wait. Before we say this, I want to mention that Mike's last movie review is titled something incel. So it's
titled The New Year's Eve Incel Horror Movie, I think is what it's titled.
So this is not a whose review is better. I just really want to put that one out there.
Well, okay, so I mean, in theory, this movie is like right up my alley. It's pretentious. I don't think I'd call it art house, because this is a studio movie up and down. Is it pretentious, or do they use? I think it's hyper pretentious. Yes.
See, I took the pretentiousness of it, which is palatable. By the way, the pretentiousness is palatable.
I have the words pretentious drivel written here.
Okay.
Because, as you said, this movie has a lot to say, but it is not subtle about it at all. It hits the nail directly on the head, and what it's saying is directly in your face, and I hated that about it.
Well, the one thing that I really like that I don't feel was as in your face, it's touched on by the characters themselves, but the lower class versus upper class aspect is, I really like that, and we don't really get to find that aspect of it out until after we found out what's Anya's character's name? Starts with an M. Help.
Margot.
Help. Thank you,
Margot.
We don't really find out the like lower class versus upper class thing until like a little bit later on, when we're also being shown kind of who Margot really is. But the other thing that I thought this didn't really mention at all, it might just be a way that I interpreted it. There is a lot to see here in relation to grind culture, because they don't really talk about grind culture in this movie. However, I think we see it whenever we see the way the way Chef is now, and then when we kind of get this, when we get this look back into him being happy in the photo when he's working at a burger joint, and then we get the first genuine smile out of him when he's cooking something simple for somebody for the sake of doing it. That's when we see like the only genuine happiness we see out of him in this whole movie. And so I don't even know if they intended to really go after grind culture in this movie, but I think there is something to be said about it in this movie.
Well, okay. I have a lot to say about this. So let me just start off by reading my Letterboxd review, which, by the way, my Letterboxd profile can be found in the description of this video. I titled it Pretentious Drivel or Pretentious Masterpiece. I went into this knowing virtually nothing about it, but it was a real struggle to get through. I think the premise is okay, but it's too direct with what it's trying to say, and there's not enough subtlety. The chef comes off as a whiny baby, and I don't feel bad for him at all. I get what they're trying to say with everything, but it just comes off as pretentious drivel. The cinematography is great, the acting is amazing, the effects are good, but there's not enough subtlety for this to be meaningful in any way. As someone who worked in a kitchen for 10 plus years, I hated this. The chef made his own decisions in life at every turn, and he took zero responsibility for those decisions and blamed everybody else. What a You don't like your job as a chef? Find a new job. I hate it. I legit hated this. The main character is unlikable. The only people I semi-like is the main couple until the big twist. We are going to have spoilers in this, by the way, so heads up on that. I don't think there's a way to talk about this movie in a meaningful way without spoiling this movie. Everyone is unlikable, and I'm rooting for no one. And the chef is such a whiny little baby that I hated it. I hated it up and down. And the best cinematography in the world and the best framing and composition is not good enough if I don't care about any of the people in them. And the only person I care about is Anya, Margot. Anya, did I say that right? Is that right? Anya. She's the only one I cared about. Up and down, everyone else is unlikable, and it made me not give a shit about what was happening at all.
Well, I think that's by design. Yes. I mean, not making you not care.
Absolutely.
It's by design, but I don't think you have to.
But it's not by design.
To say you don't have to. Not to say you don't have to.
But the chef is the guy. They want you to see his point of why he's doing this, and he's the one that has all of the stuff to say that this movie is trying to tell you about not only class, but about the food culture being a cult, and all of it. All of it is being said through him, but he's such a whiny little bitch about it that it's hard for me to take what he's saying seriously, because he takes zero responsibility for his own life, and he blames everyone else for his problems and the way that he feels, and he takes no responsibility, and it drove me crazy.
I mean, yes, yes, and he's totally a dickhead. But as somebody like I've worked in 5-star restaurants before, and I've seen chefs like this.
Yeah, no, I know. It's not about him being not realistic. It's about him not taking responsibility for his own choices, and then because he hasn't taken any responsibility for those choices, he turns and does this crazy shit that he decides to do. Not to mention how you're going to get a whole bunch of people who strive for perfection and a whole kitchen full of people to go along with this. It's it's bananas, and it's unbelievable up and down. But that's the main problem I had with this, is that the chef, I just don't I just don't like him. And the decisions that he's making through every step of the way is just unbelievable and whiny and pretentious and crying. And I like pretentious art house stuff. I almost always like pretentious art house stuff, but this was a real struggle to get through, dude. The premise is okay, but other than that,
I don't know. I mean, I don't think you were supposed to like him.
it's no, I know, but
he's the villain.
yes,
And so,
absolutely.
I'm not saying you didn't realize that.
But
I'm
what
just
he's
saying
trying to say is there's no subtlety in what he's trying to say, and because there's no subtlety, they basically lay out why he's doing this completely instead of. I feel like they didn't think the audience was smart enough to understand what they were trying to say about class and food and chefs and restaurants and consumerism and capitalism and all of that shit. They have to lay it out in front of you in a way that makes me feel like they think the audience is dumb as shit.
Well, okay, let's look at it this way. If you have somebody who is in their position, and in the chef's position, and they want to explain why they feel a certain way to somebody, because the way he explains it, or where he explains it, is in a very like personal one-on-one conversation. And I've had many conversations with people when I worked in the service industry about the things that bothered me, and there wasn't nuance to what I was saying. And so I think a lot of it might be, and again, this is all interpretation, this is all subjective, but I think a lot of it is more he's explaining why he's doing what he's doing and the way that he feels and what's bothering him to Margot in a way that you normally would, in a regular conversational way, to someone who isn't aware of everything that's going on behind the scenes. Now, don't get me wrong. I can see how it can be taken in the aspect of film as a gross exposition.
That's what I was going to say, is when you're explaining that to somebody, how you feel, it's a conversation. When you're making a movie, especially one that tries to be as pretentious and artistic as this one does, you have to do it with some subtlety. And when you just hit people over the head with the exposition hammer, there's no subtlety there. And it made me feel like they thought the audience was too stupid to understand it.
Well, I mean, I can see that. I didn't get that from it, but I guess I can see how, it might be taken that way. One thing I do want to talk about is where you talked about how nobody in this movie is likable. And that, I mean, it's very obviously done by design, but it's the reason I feel that way, because I felt the exact same way. And what ends up happening for me personally when that happens is, if I'm already kind of into the movie, it sucks me in further because I get to see what's going to happen to these people. Now, they're not the payoff to what happens to them is pretty much what we're explained throughout the whole movie, which is everybody's going to die tonight. That's not, there's no secret to that whatsoever. However, these people are supposed to be the embodiment of the elite piles of society. And so the fact that I liked them so little was actually a quality I enjoyed.
But see, you saying that is the exact same thing as rich people looking down their nose at poor people, except it's the flip side. And you enjoying them being tortured and stuff like that, I don't find any joy in that, because it's just the flip side of everything they're trying to say is wrong.
I mean, yeah.
And the other part of it is when I don't care about anybody in the movie, I don't care about what happens to them. And so the way that you're saying it brings you more into the film, it pushed me further away from it, because not only do I not care about who they are as people, I don't care about what happens to them. And then the whole thing is, outside of how stuff unfolds, it's extremely predictable all the way through. And so there is no shocking surprise at all, even a little bit. And I felt like I knew everything that was going to happen every single step of the way, because it's just too explained the whole time. And so it just made me feel bored. Like I was bored.
That's fair.
All the way through this.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I think the predictability for me, it wasn't an issue, because this movie is clearly more about sending a message and pointing out flaws in certain systems that exist.
Right, but just like you and I had a conversation about Candyman on the phone the other day, all it does is point it out. That's all it does. There's there's like no solution. There's no like showing it from the other side or anything. All it does is point it out. And I get that in some films you can kind of be like, okay, this is raising a problem that I didn't know exist in documentaries and such. With this, you and I are both have spent so much time in kitchens that I know all of these problems already exist. I am well aware of that. And so they're not showing me anything that I didn't know existed. And they're just pointing this thing out like, hey, look at this. And so for me, again, this is a for me thing. It just was boring. There was nothing new about what they're trying to say because they're hitting you over the head with a sledgehammer exposition wise and plot wise.
Right. Well, the kitchen issues, I don't think are a big. I mean, enough people have seen Gordon Ramsay shows and stuff like that. I don't think the kitchen issues, those are just there.
No, I'm
as
talking about more the capitalism
device.
and the class,
okay.
And all the other stuff that they're trying to touch on. I get all of that, and I don't want anybody to think that like all that stuff escaped me because it's very apparent in this movie what they're trying to say. There's almost no room for interpretation on any of that, which is, I think, a bigger problem in the movie. It doesn't allow you to decide what's right and what's wrong. It just, there's no room for interpretation of right and wrong in this movie. And so it just felt shallow. Does that make sense?
It does, but I don't agree with you. I don't agree that it was shallow. I don't think it's got some like insane depth or anything like that, but I do. Let's put it this way. A big part of why I enjoyed this movie is because it does touch so heavily on things that I personally that are personal issues for me as well. Things that I hold to heart.
Such as,
and so such as the elitism, the rich people not being able to appreciate things that are being done for them.
But everybody knows that.
I'm aware of that. I know. But being aware of it, whenever you're watching something that aligns with something you agree with, not the murder aspect, obviously, but when you're watching something that's touching on something that you agree with, something you're passionate about, you're gonna enjoy it more inherently.
Okay, but,
so that might be
to be upfront. I agree with everything that they were saying in this as well.
Oh yeah,
but
no, I don't think you're like some elitist.
But that doesn't make it clever.
Well, it doesn't have to be clever to be entertaining, though.
But it's trying so hard to be pretentious and art house like and clever that's what bothered me about it. It's not.
Well, see that, and again, that's where I disagree. I think the pretentiousness is more it's not being pretentious. I think it's I don't think it's being pretentious. I think it's using pretentiousness.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And so that again, that to me, it's a very snarky film. And it's snarky about things that I'm very cynical, negative about. And so again, I think it may have drawn me in more because these are the things that like genuinely like piss me off. And so I was more into that. I was more into the messages it was trying to send than maybe how it was made as a film overall, while still appreciating what it was doing as a film. Because I mean, we also have to agree, it throws in these little elements of food videography. And what I mean by that is like when I worked on a cooking show and we would have to do like B-roll of like the dishes and everything after the chef got done making everything. And you see that a lot on food shows. And so I really felt like it was using that and we've got the title cards for the dishes. Everything is very, very snarky. So it's almost, to me, it felt like it was almost like laughing in the face of these things that only a small percentage of the population get to really enjoy, while simultaneously taking them for granted. And so that to me was clever. It might not be ingenious, it might not be groundbreaking, but I still think there's something clever in the writing here.
Okay, so a couple things on what you just said. To be clear, you and I have known each other for a very long time, and you know damn well how I feel about elitism and all that other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You and I are on the same page about all of that.
Yeah, and I want to make that clear. Again, I'm not saying Mike is some like elitist dick or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Well, no, I know, but my point is, I am on the same page as you about all of that stuff, and yet I took it in a completely different way.
So maybe there's more up for interpretation than you thought there was.
Not necessarily, because and when I said interpretation, I meant the interpretation of right and wrong within this movie, not necessarily all of that stuff.
Yeah, okay.
What's interesting is that because we feel the same way and we took it two different directions, that is interesting. But I also, as far as not a lot of people knowing about this stuff that exists within fine dining and restaurants and kitchens in general, maybe it's because I'm just so desensitized to all of that stuff, and I just don't care about any of it. And that I find it to be super pretentious anyway. And yes, they're using the pretentiousness in a way that shows what they're trying to say.
You're talking about the pretentiousness of fine dining?
Yes.
I absolutely
they're
agree with
using,
you.
Yeah, they're using pretentiousness in a way in this movie that says something, but they're also being pretentious about it on the other end with film. And it bothers me a lot, because looking down at rich people, looking down at poor people, and all the classism and stuff that's in this movie, it goes both ways. And poor people looking up at rich people, up is a term, but you know what I mean? Poor people looking down upon rich people because they've been handed everything is the exact same thing. It's the exact same thing that makes you hate rich people, and it makes people hypocrites, because because they have no more say in what they were given or what they were born with or any of that other stuff than poor people do. And to look down on somebody because of that is the exact same thing.
Okay. So, if that's what you took from what I said,
no, that's what I took from this movie.
Okay. So, the way I took it, and again, this could be me, injecting my own ideas and passions and whatever into it. I don't think this is talking about looking down/up at rich people. I think that because they're rich, more the ones who are and the way they act and use it. That's how I took it.
But I'm talking about more of the guy who wrote this. Like, the guy that wrote this clearly has those views. And so making that point of like, rich people look down at poor people and look at how awful the classism there is, it's the same thing. And
I think but that's what I'm saying is I think it's talking about not all rich people, but all rich people that think they're God's gift to the world. That's how I took it anyway. I mean, maybe,
but all of that plays into the chef, because the chef is the chef is such a dickhead, and he has made these
rich,
but he's also made these decisions that led him here to make him hate not only his career, but his life, his customers, all of it. He's made those decisions, and then when he gets there, he's looking around going, look at how much they've made me shit on my own art, and look at how far I've come from the hamburger stand, and all of this, while simultaneously being made rich and given fame and all of that stuff. You can't have it both ways. And it made me feel like he's a little crybaby.
Oh, he is, and I want to make it clear, at no point in this movie I was like, oh, he used to be happy. Like, no, that never happened once. But again, I didn't take it in that way. I took it in the only person we're supposed to like in this, as far as from their character, is Margot. She's the only one we're supposed to like. Yeah, and honestly, for a little bit, I even liked Tyler, because, but in more of a kind of pity kind of way, because he comes off as this character who really wants to be a foodie, and he's not pretentious, but he wants to fit in with that crowd.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we get this sprinkling of the dude really cares about food, and he's really passionate about food. And again, what you were saying about that is like there is. I don't know if it was meant to be in there, but I did take this as like, oh, I have an even lesser opinion of fine dining than I did before. But I even liked him for a certain moment, and then didn't.
It just, but the thing is, it's like this movie is trying so hard to be like, isn't fine dining pretentious nonsense? It's like writing a movie about yachting and then expecting to have this big, like, isn't yachting pretentious? Isn't that crazy? Like, it's the same thing. Of course, that's the whole point of the entire culture over there, and or art or any of it. And it's just to point it out is just so like, duh. It's not, I don't know. It just didn't come off as smart or intellectual or even interesting to me in that way. And that's the whole point of this movie, is to point all of that stuff out. But when you're pointing stuff out that is so glaringly obvious and just duh, it just doesn't work. And for me,
that's fair. I don't know. Like I said, the movie did have a lot to say, things that I really agree with. The fact that it can even be so polarizing, I think, is something that, you know, it deserves merit for. But overall,
sorry.
No,
for instance, The Mess. The Mess was a point where I kind of really checked out on this. Because it's, first of all, it's super obvious what's about to happen, and I don't think they're trying to hide it. But it just, like, when everyone is shocked at what he does, I saw it coming from so far away that it wasn't shocking to me. But at the same time, it's hitting the what this movie is trying to say. It's hitting the nail directly on the head, and is so in your face about what it's trying to say. Like, he's giving his life for these people, for their enjoyment, for the evening, and to the culture of food, and to the cult of food, and trying to give his life to become more like the chef and all of that stuff. It's just so in your face about it that it just didn't come off as, I don't know. I'm just repeating myself at this point, but does that make sense?
No, I think that scene in particular, I don't know. I didn't take that from it. As far as like him killing himself for the sake of the food.
No, not for the food, for the lifestyle and trying to become a chef and all that stuff. Yeah.
I took him killing himself as more of everybody knows they're gonna die already, and so he's just like a moving piece in a bigger plan.
Right.
And then I also took it as maybe he knows he's not so great, and that's all he ever wanted, which does kind of tie into what you're saying, I guess, now that I've just said that out loud. I thought I didn't think it was shocking, because I didn't know how he was going to do it, but I knew that dude was going to die. Either the chef was going to kill him, or he was going to kill himself.
I did expect the chef to kill him, to be fair.
I thought the chef was going to kill him. And yeah, I don't know. That scene to me was more of a catalyst piece than a more meaningful piece. Maybe I missed something. That's totally possible. It happens. I tune out sometimes.
Well, no, it definitely is. It's a precursor to what is going to happen for the rest of the evening, and especially even with the chopping of the finger and all that stuff. That The Mess is the thing that leads us into all of that, and it's arguably the start of Act 2. And I get all of that it's moving our plot along so that we can get to the more meaningful stuff, but it's just a perfect example of being too blatant and too obvious with what you're trying to say, and making me feel like the director and the writers didn't feel like the audience was smart enough to get what they're trying to say, so they have to just spell it out for you. Like, and it's the conversation and the monologue from Ray Fiennes at the beginning of that whole thing. All of it is just so duh, that it pissed me off more than it did anything else. Cause it's just like, trust the audience to understand what's happening. You don't need to lay this out for me so much.
Well, I think if this is if we take anything from this movie is a very good lesson in subjectivity.
I mean, I guess, yeah.
I think it
for
is.
sure.
I
Yeah,
think
I agree with that.
I think it is because you and I took very different things from this movie and we appreciated a different quantity of things and quality of the quantity of things of this movie. And so I think that's definitely a redeeming quality personally.
Okay, well, I mean, we're not going to come to any agreement here, I don't think, because this is like, I think we just see this too differently. I think this is like,
which
like
isn't
you said,
an issue, which isn't a problem.
No, not at all. And I think some of our best conversations and best podcasts have come from us seeing a movie in dramatically different ways. But okay, well, why don't you go ahead and give me your final thoughts and your rating on this movie, unless you have anything else you want to add before we get to that.
No, there isn't. No, I think this. I really liked it. I thought everything was really well done. There are some plot holes that maybe I'm a little bit more aware of now than when I watched it initially. However, I still maintain that I really liked this movie. I liked, for the most part, what it was trying to say. There were a couple things that we just don't have time to really touch base on that I was kind of like, I could have done without that. But overall, I thought it was really fun. I think it's definitely worth a watch. And I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
Wow, that's actually lower than I thought you were going to give it. That's surprising.
I feel like I've been giving out a lot of 8 and 9s lately, and I feel like it's starting to feel like maybe I just like everything.
That's funny.
And I feel like I can't really be taken seriously if I'm like, everything's wonderful.
I mean, that's fair. All right, well, I kind of feel like this does have a lot to say, but the way it goes about saying it is a little bit too, it's just not subtle enough. And when you're not subtle in a movie that is trying to use pretentiousness and the vibe of an art house movie, art house thrives on subtlety and the things that you don't say.
Maybe that's why I liked it.
That's a good point. Yeah. But art house thrives on subtlety and the things that you don't say. And leaving things up for interpretation is part of what makes movies like this stand out to me. When you tell me exactly how I should feel about the situation and hit me over the head with that I already know is going on in the world, but you don't offer any solutions or any other points of view with it, it just feels one-sided and heavy-handed. And for me, that is the biggest problem with this movie, is there is no subtlety or room for interpretation. Now, we took it in very different ways, and I will say the subjectivity, like you said, that's really interesting that we can both have the exact same point of view on the world and then watch this movie and interpret it in very different ways. But as far as the interpretation of right and wrong and things that they're trying to say in this movie, like I've said before, capitalism, consumerism, the restaurant industry,
elitism,
fine dining, elitism, all of it. I agree with everything that this movie is saying, but it's just not saying it in a meaningful enough way for me to actually care about the stuff that they're saying. And my takeaway from it was not, wow, this is a real problem. My takeaway was, wow, they really didn't trust their audience to understand what they're trying to say, so they just had to bludgeon you to death with what they're saying. And that's an issue for me. I think that's a really big issue, especially like you said, they're trying to use pretentiousness in a way that suits what the message of this movie is. And I think that would have helped it enormously. So for me, this is a 4 out of 10. The best cinematography in the world can't save a bad script or something that I'm not interested in. And because I don't like any of these characters, Margot's okay, but because I don't care about any of them or their struggle, I don't care about what happens in this at all. So it's a 4 out of 10 for me.
Fair enough.
So,
I mean, you're wrong, but fair enough.
And that's what's so great about movies, is that we can watch the same movie and come away with 2 very different opinions about it.
Yep.
Especially
100%.
Movies like this.
100%.
So, am I full of shit? Let me know down in the comments, because I know that I am probably in the minority of thinking this way about this movie. It would be really interesting to hear what you guys have to say. So let us know down in the comments what you guys have to say and how you felt about this movie. Because I'm sure it's very different than what I'm saying and maybe closer aligns to what Brett has been saying. But if you like this, make sure you hit the like button. If you really liked it, make sure you hit the subscribe button because we got a lot more content like this on this channel. I do want to say thank you to all of the new subs that have been coming in lately. It's been insane to watch the channel grow the last month or so. It's been really cool. I know last month we did miss a week, and that was because I ended up going into the hospital. Brett was out of town. It was a weird month last month. And our whole goal for this year is to really hit the ground running hard with this channel. And so we've got a lot of really cool plans for this next year. And it would be awesome if you hit the subscribe button and came on that ride with us. You got anything else to say before we get out of here?
No. As far as you mentioned the subscribers, these are the videos that I think are going to be really, really interesting in the comments section as we get bigger and more people are more interactive to actually see like what side of the aisle people fall on.
Yeah.
I want people to be able to voice those in a constructive way. You know who you are. And so I think it'll be a lot of fun to see like what side of the aisle people fall on as we get bigger, because obviously the more subscribers we have, the more we're going to get a lot of comments and stuff like that. And I think that's going to be really cool.
So, all right. Thank you guys for watching. If you made it all the way to the end of this podcast, and we will see you guys next time from the deep. Bye-bye.
Ta-ta.